And you realize
Yeah.
that all of a sudden Burning Man is the culmination, the integration, the convergence of all of these ideas, now super packed, heated up in the desert, cooked, like pressure cooked for 8 straight days, and then it explodes back into the culture.
Hello everyone. As we prepare to go to Burning Man again, I wanted to set up the next 2 episodes of our podcast with some kind of explanation of why we go there, and really to answer the question, why should anyone, especially Christians, care about what happens at Burning Man? Isn't this some kind of just rebellious group of people? And so in order to accomplish this, my friend and ministry partner, Carl Teichrib, he was interviewed by our friends over at Canary Cry Radio. And they did a tremendous job just going through a lot of the reasons of why he started going to Burning Man, and then how we talked a little bit about how we got started, about how we got started with Orbis Sentry later on. But the main thing that we're focusing on is why we go to Burning Man, what we do there, and what it represents. And in this first part, this is going to be a series of segments from the original interview that's on Canary Cry Radio, which there will be a link below in the description section. But in these different segments, which we'll compile together into 2 different episodes, in this first part, Carl talks about how he, in his research into technology, Silicon Valley, San Francisco counterculture, SLN, the hippie movement, psychedelics, alternative spirituality, art, conceptions of the self, and how all these things come together and get pressure cooked back into society. And he does a really good explanation of how these are all kind of putting together the same message. So I'm going to be doing these segments, and I'll tell you about each one, and then we'll move on. And I hope that you find this helpful in understanding what we're doing, what Burning Man is all about, and why we go, and then the outreach that we have there to bring the gospel of Christ. So, hope you enjoy this.
Look at the broad meta narratives and trends and culture for us in the lens of like individual news stories. But for you, it's from the lens of these big, one focus of yours is transformational events. And this, is things. So tell us a little bit about transformational events for people.
Sure. So I'll just give you a little bit more background because it's going to be, it's a segue. There's a pattern to this. So back in the late 1990s, I was going to World Federalist events. I ended up being a delegate at the United Nations Millennium Forum. I've been to other UN and global governance events, all for research, all for the sake of trying to understand the concepts around global governance. At the same time, I was going to interfaith events. I still go to the Parliament of World Religions when they have it. I've been to the last 4 of those, including the virtual event during the COVID years, and trying to understand the interfaith side, because there is a shift towards global religions, or religions moving towards a global narrative as well. And all of these are interlocking. That's the interesting part of this, gentlemen. They all interlock. They converge.
Yeah.
And then on the transhumanist side, man, I jumped into the fray on that one sometime in, I think, 2008, 2007, started digging into it. My first event I went to that was a transhumanist in the flesh, not in VR, because I did, not VR, but I was in Second Life, going to some transhumanist events in Second Life. My first venture into it, going to a real in the flesh transhumanist event, was back in 2010. With the Mormon Transhumanist Association, one of their events. So, I've been down a lot of different roads, and they seem to be divergent. They seem to be on different tracks. And yet, as you unpack the worldview, as you unpack the thinking, the narrative, the vision behind these and other associated movements, everything from psychedelics to understanding, macro economic political ideologies. You'll all of a sudden realize, man, it's all basically saying the same thing, just from a different angle, from a different perspective. And I was working through, all right, if there is a political concept of one world, and there is, because I watched it, I witnessed it. If there is a interfaith religious component to one world, the sense of this is where we're going to find our meaning and our purpose, and there is, I've been there. I've walked down that path. If there's a technological component that says, hey, we can create the kingdom of God on earth by uploading ourselves, by becoming more than what we were intended to be, and there is, there has to also be a cultural artistic expression.
Yeah.
It can't just land in the realm of academic theory or broad ideas. There has to be a cultural, artistic, celebratory way of looking at this. And that's where I ended up running into transformational culture. And I started poking into it. I don't know. I already had Burning Man in my back pocket before the year 2000, but I never really took it. Not that I didn't take it seriously. I just didn't take the time to go into it. But I had, I knew it existed. But it wasn't until like 2007, 2008, where all of a sudden was going, yeah, I really kind of need to take another look at this, because the indicators show that this is a point where culture is expressing that re-enchanted global ideal, that concept of, hey, we're going to find our higher purpose, our higher selves in this desert environment. And so transformational culture or evolutionary culture incorporate events like Burning Man. It's not the only one. In fact, there's an ecosystem and a massive global network of these events. Many of them are not connected, but they are connected ideologically or spiritually, certainly from the perspective of I'm encountering a new reality, a new homeland, a place where I can now finally be my true self, and I can do it with a communal kind of fashion. And that began the quest to understand this and to see, okay, how does this remash the ideas of global thinking, spirituality, concepts of the self, and then how does that push out beyond and re-emerge back into culture and pour into the cracks and crevices of our civilization. So that's kind of how I got to transformational festivals, evolutionary culture. And now a lot of people know my work because of Burning Man and because of this facet, but it's just simply an extension of something that's already been, I've already been wrestling with it for a long time, even before I even knew that there was a cultural expression. And as you dive into this, I mean, it's not just simply going to a couple of events to try to get a sense of where it came from and what it's all about. You unpack the backstory. And as you're unpacking the backstory, I mean, you're running into tech culture, the history of San Francisco, the history of Silicon Valley. You dive into the hippie movement, the counterculture. You end up looking into Stanford and Esalen, and the list just goes on and on and on. The beats, the surrealist movement. I mean, the happenings. It just Rainbow Family. It just unpacks Timothy Leary, Aldous Huxley, Hubbard. The list just endlessly rolls, and you realize that all of a sudden Burning Man is the culmination, the integration, the convergence of all of these ideas, now super packed, heated up in the desert, cooked, like pressure cooked for 8 straight days. And then it explodes back into the culture. Yeah. And that's what this is. I'm looking at Burning Man as kind of like the wall that you bounce the ball off of. It's the rebound, but it's going to change the shape of that ball when it comes back at you.
The idea of these transformational events, of which Burning Man might be the sort of singular, most, like you say, distilled version of that. But you see these things all over the place. Like you say, it's music festivals, it's art festivals, it's these sort of things that become almost like a spiritual mechanism or a spiritual technology by which these ideas, these ideologies, these things go from the sort of esoteric elite think tank realm of theorizing, and it's these festivals, these spiritual mechanisms, these ceremonies, much like we see throughout ancient history. You know, the Eleusinian mysteries and the this and the that, right? That act as the sort of spiritual technology or mechanism to download and disperse, like you say, disseminate. And part of your work and my observation, participation in your work is spotting almost specifically where we see an ideology or a theory or something, presented at Burning Man, whether it's a workshop or a music performance or something like that. And sometimes you can see it the exact moment that it expresses itself and holds its place in society. And suddenly it's not a vague elite theory. It becomes a part of the ideology for secular culture.
Okay, now we'll skip ahead a little bit. This next section, Carl's going to talk about how the popularity of transformational festivals, how it represents this shift in a religious idea, a communal religious idea, and that people are seeking something spiritual. And the reason this is important is because the church, the Christian church, the evangelical church, for the most part, is largely unaware that this is a problem. For the last 100 years, the Christian church has focused its efforts on defending the faith against secular atheistic humanism. And moving forward, should the Lord Jesus tarry and not return in the next few years, the challenge to the church is going to be this idea of global governance, transcendence, one world, uniting all the world together in a re-enchantment belief system, which are embodied in these transformational festivals. So, this is something worth paying attention to.
One thing that comes out with these festivals, these encounters is, and this is important from a 30,000 foot view, it demonstrates that we're not in a secular age. It demonstrates we're not in that purely materialistic, atheistic sense of what reality should look like or feel like. It is now an expression to say that mankind is spiritual, and that we're not just simply talking about spirituality, we're actively searching it out. We're actively seeking it, not even as individuals, but we're doing it communally. We're doing it as a culture. We are hoping and trying to grasp for something that gives us a higher purpose, or that allows us to feel like we're connected into something bigger than ourselves. And so I look at transformational festivals as a proof, a type of proof text to say that we're past the age of secularism. And it's Jacques Ellul, who already in the early 1970s, made the argument that secularism is just a pause. It's a stopgap, a short pause between civilization rejecting one religion and accepting the emergence of a new religion.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And I'm like, this fits the mold. If you look back, of course, to the early 1970s, late 1960s, you have the very first, you could call them, transformational festival. You have the Trips Festival. You've got the happenings. The late 1960s, early 1970s is basically the seedbed for what this now looks like in a new fashion. But it was still the same thing. Woodstock fits it in part, absolutely. It's part of that historical context. But what makes today's transformational festivals a transformational experience is that you are anticipating coming with the idea that this is something that's going to shape you, that this is, you're actually looking for transformation. It's not just simply, oh, I'm going to go to a concert. No, you're not, looking on as a spectator. The understanding is that you are entering as a participant, and that your psyche is going to be reshaped by what you've just encountered. Electric Forest Festival is another one. There's so many. I mean, you can take a look even at the mega concert events like Coachella and Tomorrowland, and even within those, there's the argument being made that they are already exhibiting that sense of, hey, we feel like we're part of something bigger. I mean, I take a look at the whole Tomorrowland festival mystique, and they have their own myth, they have their own legend. Even their staging is designed in such a manner to perpetuate year after year after year this continual big story that we're all connected, we're all part of this global journey together. So what is it saying? Well, it's saying that we have a spiritual world. It's no longer just materialism. In fact, I hate to say it to the atheistic community. I mean, we're thinking especially of Harris and Dawkins and those types. Your train came and went.
Okay, as the world transitions out of this secular, humanistic, atheistic kind of idea, and it's moving towards this idea of re-enchantment, there's an interesting little segment here in the discussion on how the idea of re-enchantment is becoming mainstream, based on an article that recently came out in the New York Times. I think you'll find this discussion very interesting.
And I'm teeing up Basil a little bit here. The New York Times would agree with you. And I think
we have, what is it? The New York Times, gods? The New York Times writing an article about how we have entered the age of re-enchantment. And of course, it's the New York Times, so they have to describe what they see actually happening, because we all feel the age of re-enchantment happening. Mm-hmm. But, their job as the secular narrative crafters, they have to put it in this interesting framing on this headline. We are sliding back into the Middle Ages. And so you think, okay, what do they mean by the Middle Ages? What is that? And it doesn't take an analyst or a trend spotter or a podcaster to pick out and find exactly, what they're trying to say. They are straight up saying it in the exact words that you've been describing it to us here. Gans, I saw you highlighting things. Did you have a specific way you wanted to go?
Yeah. I think, to your point, Basil, about the word re-enchantment, it's one thing to have an article titled "We're Sliding Back into the Middle Ages," but what I was going to say was, Carl, that the New York Times is agreeing with you. The mainstream media is agreeing with you with the premise of re-enchantment. Let me read a little spot here. And the whole point of this article, interestingly enough, is that with the emergence of technology, the whole secular movement and the move towards more tech was supposed to erase magic and these types of enchanted ideas, but rather it did the opposite.
So they start out the article talking about Tucker Carlson and his story about being attacked by a demon, an interesting, high profile spiritual experience that a lot of people, know about. They bring up the FEMA officer coming out and talking about how he was teleported, Then they talk about, how the Catholic Church has seen a resurgence of people showing up, how the churches are packed recently with new converts. They also talk about the Orthodox Church, which has been a very
something on that. Yeah,
a specific interest of mine, seeing this again with the analyst's eye, seeing this very interesting draw towards the Orthodox forms of Christianity, these sort of mystical, these sort of, that sort of thing, not just evangelical Protestant American Christianity. And they say here, it says, the backdrop of all this is the peculiar atmosphere of contemporary public life. So comparing these spiritual experiences with the secular life, which people are moving out of or being forced out of, contemporary public life, claustrophobic, faintly hallucinatory, where what we know as real feels like sand shifting under our feet. The First Lady, Melania Trump, walks a humanoid robot down a White House red carpet and later tells the audience to imagine a future humanoid educator named Plato. A former intelligence official testifies under oath that the United States has been secretly retrieving and reverse engineering crashed UFOs for decades, and the non-human biologics have been recovered. So it's really this full scale, full saturation of public secular life with this sort of odd reenchanted thing. And it says, demonic vexation, teleportation, increased interest in religious practice, those phenomena are all signs that life feels to many increasingly charged with unseen forces. You might say it has been re-enchanted. There's a widespread feeling that the material explanation is no longer sufficient, that something uncanny, maybe even numinous, is diffused into the texture of ordinary American life.
Wow, wow, wow.
Right? It's like could come
Golf
straight.
clap for Carl. I think we all need to just
It could be
bow
an
to
excerpt
Carl.
from Game of Gods. And you do Yeah, go ahead if you have a response.
Yeah. I'm just blown away. That's wild. I mean,
Yeah.
It fits exactly. They're right.
Okay, skipping ahead again, we get to this next section where Carl talks about the origin of the term re-enchantment, and then how the idea of re-enchantment is it's a connecting word that connects to the idea of a mystical return to experience and esoteric kind of belief systems. But one of the things that's important to understand about it is this term has been regarded by some, again, I feel like it's indicative of how little the church understands about this. We had a lot of pushback when we first stepped into this ministry, and people were saying, the age of re-enchantment, what is that? That sounds just like some fanciful thing, and that it was very much kind of dismissed. And the reality is, this is a term that's been used by a lot of people, influential people, in the Club of Rome, in leaders of the Green Movement, all kinds of high-level thinkers that have helped to push the world to the place that it's in right now. So I hope you'll find this interesting and enjoyable, and you see how it connects to the whole Burning Man experience.
Yeah, so the term re-enchantment isn't my inventing.
Mm-hmm.
Rather it came through observation of this long shift, and then hearing the phrase being used by very specific individuals over the last number of years, individuals, names that for the most part people just won't know, like Erwin Laszlo, who was a very important individual with the Club of Rome, and also very involved in some of the Stanford projects in the 1970s. And I think it was in 2005 when he was at a World Goodwill meeting, which is basically another division of Lucis Trust. He was using the term re-enchantment, that the world needed to be re-enchanted again, that needed to find its sense of purpose within oneness. And then, going back even further to taking a look at how the Club of Rome in the 1970s was talking about the necessity for a new myth. And then Stanford Research Institute was talking about the changing images of man, which was essentially saying the same thing. What was happening at the Esalen Institute, and then considering too what was taking shape within the realm of international geopolitics as it fit with sustainable development and the new green thinking that received a global platform in 1972 through the work of Maurice Strong and Wayne Kynes. And I knew Wayne Kynes personally, and I'd also spent a day with Maurice, but I knew Wayne's personally to the point where he shared a lot of stuff privately. Very, very interesting. He only lived a few miles away from where I currently live. Really important figures, arguably probably the two most important figures in setting the tone for the environmental movement. And as you unpack the global sustainable development environmental concepts, you run into stuff that just absolutely screams reenchantment. I'll read you a quote from Game of Gods, but this is Boutros Ghali back in 1992 at the very, very end of the Rio Earth Summit. In fact, these are his closing statements. I should like to conclude by saying that the spirit of Rio must create a new form of good citizenship. After loving his neighbor as the Bible required him to, post-Rio man must also love the world, including the flowers, birds, and trees, every part of that natural environment that we are constantly destroying. Over and above the moral contract with God, over and above the social contract concluded with men, we must now conclude an ethical and political contract with nature, with this earth to which we owe our very existence and which gives us life. To the ancients, the Nile was a god to be venerated, as was the Rhine, an infinite source of European myths, or the Amazonian forest, the mother of forests. Throughout the world, nature was the abode of the divinities that gave the forest, the desert, or the mountains a personality which commanded worship and respect. The earth had a soul. To find that soul again, to give it new life, that is the essence of Rio. And when I read that, my goodness, many, many, many years ago, I was picking up what was already being put down in the mid-1990s, early 1990s. And I was like, wow, that is setting the stage. That already is. And at that time, I didn't have the language for it, but that is re-enchantment right there. That sense of purpose, that sense of meaning is in this mythical, let's call it a pagan construct. And that's where we find our sense of direction. And we have to give that to the whole world. We have to give the world that vision, which is what happened during 1970 for the very first Earth Day when they published the Environmental Handbook. It gave them that same sense of, this is your re-enchanted purpose in life. This is the whole reason for your existence. And then when you combine that with ecstatic encounters, with the sense of celebration that comes with events like Burning Man, now it's not just psychedelics, 100%. Now it's not just abstract. It becomes a feeling. It's something that you now participate in with your senses, your emotions. Speaking of psychedelics, so Gons and Basil, you guys will find this interesting. In March, I was at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And by the way, South by Southwest has a lot of intersections with Burning Man. I heard Burning Man being referenced probably more times than I could count, or that I could care to count. I went to a workshop hosted by Christopher Koch, very, very prominent neuroscientist involved in the study of consciousness to try to understand what is consciousness. And a number of years ago, a few decades ago, I believe, he had famously put out a kind of a challenge that at a certain point in time, because of good study, good scientific analysis, we would have a materialist understanding for consciousness. That there would be a materialist theory for consciousness. And there he was at South by Southwest telling us, I was wrong. Not only am I wrong, not only is there no materialist understanding, no true materialist concept or theory or understanding of consciousness, it has not just simply failed us, it has failed us catastrophically. That was,
Wow.
I mean, it was a huge admission. And so he was very clear, we're not going to go back to religion. And by that, we all could infer pretty easily, he meant Christianity. We're not going back there. And this is how it parallels the sense of reenchantment. We're not going back to that. We're just not. Where do we go? Well, we're going to now search out the mystical, and we're going to pursue psychedelics, because maybe this offers us a gateway to give us a sense of how we can at least express and feel internally how consciousness might be and what it maybe is. It was a fascinating conversation when you realize that, oh, you're just simply giving us this re-enchanted worldview. It's not, we're not going to go back to Christianity, like, heaven's sake, no.
Yeah, which sounds more like a desire or a command of his than like an observation.
We again see the same thing, not necessarily the construction of brand new religious movements. There are some things like that are taking shape, but they're small in comparison to the cultural movement, which is this cultural push to find some sense of spiritual purpose and meaning, and anything from Reiki to UFOs to golly, there's so much of this. We would call it the New Age, but this isn't the New Age. It takes it one step further, because the New Age has a more of a consumerist type of marketplace spirituality. I'm going to dabble in this thinly spread smorgasbord of spiritual practices to try to find my divine higher self. Whereas reenchantment said it's about the we. It's about the collective. It's about the community doing this together in a deeper spiritual group experience.
Yeah.
And that's where things like Burning Man all of a sudden have a special relevance, because it exemplifies that. What's interesting in all of this is, okay, so if the 1800s, 1900s had, places that had hotbeds of this, like upstate New York, if there's a place in North America specifically that really cooked this stuff up from the 1960s on, Gons, it's your state. It's California. California has been the spiritual kind of the
wellspring,
spiritual,
almost.
Yeah, the test bed. It's the petri dish, and Burning Man is a California product. Yeah. It's a San Francisco product. Happens in Nevada, but it's a San Francisco product.
Okay, in this last section for episode 1, we're going to talk about the theme of Burning Man this year, which is Axis Mundi. And this is a theme that connects to a lot of different ancient myths, the idea of a tree or a tower or something that connects the earth to the heavens. And of course, this is the desire on the part of human beings to connect to God apart from his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the true connection point between God and mankind. He is the true Axis Mundi. So, I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll see you at the end.
So I'm looking at this and I'm going, all right, we need to understand this. We need to understand it not just from the sense of, hey, this is academically really cool stuff, because it's pointing us to something, but it actually points us to the opportunity that we have as Christians, because now we have the ability to walk into these. We should have the ability to walk into these spaces and have conversations. We should understand where they're coming from so that we can enter into these conversations with a true re-enchantment. And I've been wrestling with, what does a true re-enchantment from a biblical point of view look like? And the thought has struck me, it's the resurrection. So I've had some great conversations in the last little while with a couple of buddies who we go back and forth about questions of the age of the earth and a global flood versus a local flood and all these fun things, the ice age versus the flood. I'm in the perspective that the ice age have some real problems with physics, but a global flood fits the question that the Ice Age brings up in many respects. But anyways, I digress. We have these huge conversations, and I have to remind myself at the end of it, all we're doing is talking about matter in motion. That's all of this is. The age of the earth, the dimensions, and the movement of the universe. It's cool stuff. Don't get me wrong. I get really excited about some of this stuff, but it's just matter in motion. And then I think about the resurrection, and I'm like, oh, that's bigger than the universe. That is personality, soul, spirit infused into dead matter. I can put matter into motion. I can go outside with my tractor and I can go push dirt around. Matter in motion, itty bitty nothingness. It's just an itty bitty reflection of what happens on a bigger scale. Forces, pressures, and now I got a big dirt pile. Whip-de-doo. And while matter in motion at a cosmic level is lots of fun to talk about, when all of a sudden I think about the resurrection, I'm going, oh boy, that's a different category altogether. And what strikes me as I'm thinking through the Christian answer to the question of reenchantment is a book by Jason Mankey on transformational witchcraft. And I've met Jason and had a number of conversations with him at different pagan events. He's well-known neo-pagan, a well-known Gardarian Wiccan. And he makes a very interesting argument. He comes out of a Christian background. You could argue all kinds of different things about what that might look like. But he comes out of a self-confessed Christian background, and he makes a claim: how is it that you Christians have made the resurrection of a dead guy a boring subject?
Totally.
Wow.
Dude, you are blowing my mind. This was just something I was thinking about yesterday because for those who listen to my other show, Canary Cry Clubhouse, I've been talking about this experience that I've had for a couple weeks now, and I'm just encountering God in just a wonderful way. I'm just having this wonderful time with, the Holy Spirit and things like this. And one thing that came to my mind was like, when we're talking about the resurrection and of course the gospel, and I want to make sure to be clear, the gospel is the number one essential, most important thing in the universe. Straight up, right there. Salvation, the basic, whatever. We don't even need to get weird about it. There's just the gospel of Jesus Christ is number one. And sometimes the attitude or even the literal response I get from, secular people about it is like, yeah, okay, I get it. I mean, you're asking me to believe that a guy rose from the dead and that I can go to heaven. Okay. I don't know. I'm not very motivated by the idea of going to heaven. I don't even know if it exists, that sort of things. And God bless. Everybody's on their own journey. I believe that God's got a plan for everybody to get them. But I was thinking, and I'm like, you know what? It's hard to describe to a secular person my relationship to the gospel because it's not just my ticket to heaven. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is not just simply a ticket to heaven, but it is everything. The mysteries of the universe are contained within the Logos, Jesus, the Logos, the code of reality, the reality beneath the reality, who is here before everything, manifest as a man, Jesus Christ, living a perfect life, dying, resurrecting for the forgiveness of our sins. It's not just a ticket to heaven. It's not just what it is to me now, but it contains the secrets of the universe in there. Like, I'm trying to explain to secular people, it's not just about being a good boy and going to heaven or living a good life, although it is also that, but that all the deep yearnings of the mysteries of reality that you have are contained within the gospel. And yes, you have to take a step into it in its literal written form, but then in there, when God is with you and you are with God, it opens up every yearning that you have to understand mystery. And, this age of reenchantment, they talk about it in like a cultural sense, and they're kind of dissecting the bird a little bit to understand what's going on here. But at its core, reenchantment, the understanding that there's a supernatural unseen layer of reality is not something that fills the void when trust in science and institutions is gone. Like, that's the reversal they're doing here. They're saying, no, reenchantment happens when trust in science is gone. And so enchantment comes in to fill the void because we need something. No, you go back to the garden. Adam's original experience of creation, walking with God, being with God, and then the fall being a separation of man with their sort of original relationship with God. And everything that follows for the entirety of human history is man responding to this empty thing in him. We know that we are supposed to be with the Father, to be aligned with God and in relationship, but we just can't figure out how exactly, and we try everything to try to reconnect with, the all-powerful creator of the universe, even in science, even in all these follies and these attempts that, even the secular people have, and even when they hate Jesus and they hate Christianity, their love for science, everything that they do pursue is just them pursuing connection with God again, just in a not great way, just not in the right way, just with their own power, thinking that they themselves can reconnect with this original state of man through their own power. And the gospel, of course, comes in, answers that question, but it's not just, oh, now I know how to pray and go to church and I can be a good boy and live life. It just opens up, it reconnects you with the way that God made man in relationship to the mysteries of everything. And there's an opportunity here now, just like you said, there's an opportunity for us to step in to these places or these conversations or whatever. And with that understanding, encounter these people who are becoming re-enchanted, but have just don't have the right idea. Like, they just haven't heard the gospel in a way that has gripped them yet. And it's different for everybody. God grabs each and every one of us in a different, special way. But anywho, you're totally right. I mean, this is part of the mandate that we as Christians have to respond to the moment that we're in.
Yes. The passage that comes to my mind is, in him, Jesus Christ, all things consist.
Yeah.
Hold on. That's all things. That is spiritually all things. That is physically all things. Mm-hmm. He's holding it all together. Hello. That's the greatest mystery of all.
Yeah.
That is re-enchantment, if you want to use that phraseology. That is, okay, so this year's Burning Man main theme is Axis Mundi.
Yeah.
Jesus is the true, the true Axis Mundi, who bridges it all together.
Yeah. Axis Mundi, for those who don't know, I had to look it up when I saw the theme for this year's Burning Man, but it's the pivot point of the world, the point on which the world rotates, right? That's Logos. That's Jesus before his manifest form, right? But before he became man, he always was. He was there at the beginning. He is the Axis Mundi. And, we needed a man version. Like, he had to manifest because it's just too big. We're unable to connect as Adam did. We are fallen, and it's just mind blowing. It's just It's so specific. It's so specific.
And it should get us excited.
Yeah.
It really should get us excited.
Okay, there you have it, friends. I hope you enjoyed this episode. That gives us a background for what exactly Burning Man is and how it connects to the Age of Reenchantment, the changing worldview, the thing that's happening all over the world. Stay tuned for our next episode next week, where we go into a little bit more detail about why we go to Burning Man. And I think you'll find that particularly interesting, because we're not going for the same reasons that the world is going. We have a mission that God has sent us on, and that's why we'll go. And we'll talk about that next week.